Welcome back everyone to yet another retrospective video. Today we will discuss two levels from Halo 2, the Sacred Icon and Quarantine Zone. Now, before we get started, there are two reasons why I'm doing two levels in a single episode. Number one is that my last video was relatively short. However, if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go watch it and then come back here. Second, these two levels are so intertwined that most people mistake the two as one big mission. If you happen to enjoy this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and with that all the way, let's get right into it. The development cycle of Halo 2 was undeniably rough, as Bungie's ambitions were pretty high. However, due to the many time constraints in development, there were many cuts and scrapped ideas. It is speculated that around 1/3 of the entire game was cut, and the time crunches ultimately made the game end in a cliffhanger.
I'm still scared right now, to be honest with you.
With all this cut content, you would assume the game would be broken or worse. However, the game was well received and considered a massive success. But that does not mean it was without its flaws. The two levels we will be discussing today are widely viewed as the worst in the game, but I believe they still have their moments. First, let's talk about the plot. The Arbiter, the character you play as, is en route to the library to collect the activation index for the Prophets of the Covenant. However, in order to make it to the library, you need to go through a massive barrier that was built by the Sentinels in order to contain the Flood outbreak on Delta Halo, making a quarantine zone. However, this clearly didn't work, and the Flood is now able to roam the ring. Since you are not human and not recognized as a reclaimer, the Sentinels become hostile as you enter the quarantine zone, in which no one is supposed to enter or leave, making it a struggle to fight both factions as they attack you at the same time. With both the Flood and the Sentinels hostile towards you, you are basically running to make it inside the quarantine zone to reconnect with your allies to coordinate an attack against the humans who are also on their way to obtain the index. You eventually make your way to the library, and in an attempt to stop the humans before they retrieve the index, you attack them.
How you doing?
This ultimately leaves Sergeant Johnson and Captain Miranda Keyes unconscious, and the brute chieftain Tartarus betrays the Arbiter by order of the Prophets.
When the Prophets learn of this, they will take your head when they learn. Fool, they ordered me to do it.
What you say?
Now let us get into the practical details of these two levels. I just want to start off by saying the cutscenes in this game are so good, especially in the anniversary graphics. Blur really did an amazing job with these pre-renders, even if there is a little bit of errors here and there. It feels like you are watching a high-quality movie, not to mention the outstanding dialogue and vocal performances.
The human that killed the Prophet of Regret. Who was it? Who do you think? The demon is here? Why? Looking for a little payback? Retrieving the icon is my only concern. Of course.
Throughout these two levels, you have a wide range of enemies to fight. You have the Flood infection forms, combat forms, and carrier forms, as well as the Sentinel and Sentinel Enforcer. Along with the player, the Flood can now carry energy swords, beam rifles, and sentinel beams, not to mention their new ability to reanimate the corpses that you have just made, making it more challenging than the Flood of Halo CE, as you now must strategize and prioritize your targets as well as to destroy the bodies with an energy sword so they cannot be reanimated. And yes, the Rocket Flood has returned. They are still annoying as ever. In Sacred Icon, it feels more horror-esque as the further you go down into the structure to eventually make it to the quarantine zone, the air becomes a thick green smog you can barely see through. Even when you turn on the anniversary graphics, this can still be seen even though everything becomes a little bit brighter. You navigate through small, dimly lit corridors that open into larger galleries with plenty of enemies to fight. The ability to turn invisible also gives you another way to plan your attacks and pass right through some enemies. The reason I mention the invisibility here is because it adds to the tension of the atmosphere by creating suspense as your active camo timer ticks by. You become warier of your surroundings, and you try to plan your next move when it wears off. Small gameplay mechanics like these do not only make it a more interesting way to play, but also add to the overall narrative and emotional experience. Within this level, there are some trivial details which make these two levels' world buildings top tier. For starters, the skybox is gorgeous, as you can see High Charity and the library in the distance, showing you scale and distance, and implying how much area the flood compromised before the Sentinel wall was even constructed. Not to mention the small amount of detail found in the beginning of the level where you can see the lake Master Chief killed the Prophet of Regret. In fact, in the level Regret, you can even see the Sentinel wall in the distance for those with keen eyes. Even in the end of the level Quarantine Zone is almost a carbon copy of the layout found in the library from Halo CE. This not only rewards those who pay close attention, but also narratively makes sense, as the rings were made the same way, so they should look the same as well, without making the player play through the structure like they did in CE. Speaking of which, there is more variety in these two levels than people might not give them credit for. You traverse many diverse types of Foreigner structures, not to mention the many vehicles you're given access to play through the level the way you want to. There are ghosts, wraiths, tanks, warhogs, and even the Spectre with somewhat of a cult following within the Halo community. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably don't need me to tell you that Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore's work is just outstanding and arguably the best video game soundtrack composers of all time. Their work on these two levels does not disappoint. The Sacred Icon Suite, not to mention Reclaimer, in the Quarantine Zone, are some of their best works, and each respectively plays with your emotions and does so rent-free. It's classic Halo.
Of this zone is a sacred icon critical to the great journey. I must find it.
We shall cut into the heart of this infestation, retrieve the icon, and burn any flood that stand in our way. The parasite is not to be trifled with. I hope you know what you're doing.
Of course, these two levels are not without their flaws. The map layout can be a little confusing, leading to frustration and people getting lost within the Foreigner interiors, not to mention Halo 2's weird weapon and health balancing they implemented into the game. This is largely in part due to the many cuts and time restraints found in development, but still makes completing this level at any high-level difficulty pretty stressful or infuriating for most players. They are also not shy of shoving wave after wave of enemies at you, forcing you to swap weapons as you constantly run out of ammo, and you need to switch for something that can deal with both the Flood and Sentinels you come across, making energy swords, battle rifles, shotguns, and Sentinel beams hot commodities. So with the difficulty spike due to Halo 2's weird balancing, the confusing layout of the Foreigner structures, and the limited ammo, it's not hard to see why people get frustrated when playing these levels.
More humans. They must be after the icon. On your way, Arbiter. I'll deal with these beasts.
Overall, both Sacred Icon and Quarantine Zone have their merits and drawbacks. It heavily depends on the personal preferences and playstyles you might have. Some may enjoy the challenges and detail-oriented storytelling found in Sacred Icon, while others might enjoy the more open, action-packed vehicle sequences found in Quarantine Zone. Even with all their flaws, these two levels are some of my favorites in the series. In fact, this might be a pretty controversial preference, but I could even say they overtake the levels The Arbiter and The Oracle, as there is enough detail in these two levels for me to place them above Sacred Icon and Quarantine Zone. Whether you like the levels Sacred Icon and Quarantine Zone or dislike them, tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, as I like hearing your guys' opinions as long as it's constructive. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content here on the channel, and until next time, finish the fight, and I'll see you in the next video.